What's up? Welcome back to the 2018 SNS College Football Podcast brought to you by House Beer. This week we are into the SEC conference that has certainly mattered pretty much every year for the last, decade at least or more than that. And this year I don't think that's going to change. There's certainly, I think for the first time this year in our podcast, some teams that will probably be picked to make the playoff. Pretty much mainly Alabama. I think there's a possibility that there are some other teams that are possibly picked. Maybe there's a shocker on the pod and somebody doesn't pick Alabama to win the West. But this year, we actually had a schedule. So I guess we're going to recap last year a little bit. Do you want to go on that and say what happened with the conference? Obviously, the SEC went to the national title game.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm trying to dress like an SEC fan in honor of this podcast.
Yeah.
I kind of look like I could go to Ole Miss or something. So
you look like you're in the student section at an Ole Miss game.
Yeah. I need a pom pom.
Yeah. And then you'd be good to go.
Yeah. But last year, kind of. Well, there was an interesting way we got there, considering Alabama did not even win the conference, which was very shocking.
Yeah.
Of course, didn't even make the title game, but still got into the playoff. And then we had an all-SEC playoff, which was, for a lot of us, not very fun.
Good game. I think two teams that were worthy, but, being college football fans and especially being OSU fans, of course, we don't want to see only one conference in the championship game, especially the SEC. But
it's the first time in a while that a team from the East kind of mattered. Georgia's back.
Yeah.
Everyone else in that division pretty much sucked.
Yeah.
The West was strong as usual. So I don't know. What else?
Yeah.
What else happened?
Yeah, nothing really. I mean, the one thing that did end up happening, so I guess this is a good transition or segue, is there were 6 coaching changes in the offseason. And that's one thing the last few years that we've talked about in this podcast and within our group at SNS and Associates is that the SEC, it really has been carried by Alabama the last few years. They really weren't as strong from top to bottom as they had been prior to that.
For a while, it was like a different team every year.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, now for the last
LSU struggled a little
8 years has
bit.
been Bama.
Auburn struggled a little bit. Florida's been down. Tennessee's clearly been down. They're very overrated and terrible always. So, but, I think a part of that we determined was bad coaching. And we felt like there's a lack of strong coaches. That's, I think, why we feel like the Big Ten has got a lot stronger the last few years. They've added coaches. They're paying assistant coaches. That's the biggest thing. That's the most underrated thing about a conference like the Big Ten. So the SEC, though, they had, I believe, 6 coaching changes this year. So in the West, Dan Mullen moves actually from west to east to Florida. But, at Mississippi State, you have Joe Moorhead, who was Penn State's offensive coordinator for, how long was he there? I don't remember. The last, few years or something.
I don't remember how long he was there. But.
He was a pretty innovative play caller. He reminded me a lot of Lincoln Riley. He brought a lot to Penn State, and that could be when we get into the Big Ten pod, that could be something that we actually underrate as far as Penn State, what they lost last year. But we don't really know a lot about Moorhead. It looks like he did pretty well at Fordham when he was a head coach, so he does have some head coaching experience. I actually wasn't sure going into this pod if he did, but I actually think that he's going to do a good job. I feel like he has a good understanding of how he's a lot like Lincoln Riley. I feel like he's a very good offensive mind, and if he has a good defensive coordinator, I don't know who that is. Let's see here. Bob Shoop was the DC at Tennessee and at Penn State before. So whatever. I don't know who that fucking guy is. But I do think Moorhead will be good, though, for Mississippi State, and he'll keep what Mullen had going, which was a pretty solid team that was always underrated in the West, always finished above projected or media projections and whatnot. So
Mullen always got the most out of his guys in Mississippi State. So when we talk about Florida, we'll mention that a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the themes I've seen in this conference looking at teams is it seems like there's a lot of experience in this conference too.
Yeah, a lot of guys back.
So I think that's going to be good for a lot of the teams improving this year.
Yeah.
And Mississippi State is, I think they are the most experienced team in the conference.
They're up there with, I think, the team that we'll talk about next. If you don't have anything more to, I mean, if we want to give Mississippi State, they're going to be strong on the defensive line. They bring back Nick Fitzgerald, who's a solid quarterback. So I think that's where their strength is definitely D-line. They have 2 NFL high draft picks there with, I think it's Sweat and somebody else. I don't know. Their defense is going to be quite strong, though, because of the D-line. They should be a pretty good running team. So,
yeah, good running team. They've got 4 starters back on the O-line.
And, honestly, like, if somehow they caught some breaks, like, I think it'd be – I think if you pick anybody but Bama in the West, you're just simply playing contrarian. Like, you're not being reasonable. But if they're – like, and the thing is, though, is it's not like Alabama's so much a lock every year. Like, Auburn won this division last year. So – it's not like I don't think Auburn or a team like Mississippi State doesn't have a chance. If there were going to be other teams that could win this division, Mississippi State is one of them. Now, I think it's really unlikely, but...
Yeah, the thing is, Alabama... So, you'd probably say that Mississippi State and Auburn are the 2 teams in this division who would be the teams that could beat Bama, but both of them go on the road.
Bama plays
to
at
Bama.
home. So I just feel like this year it's much more lockish than we think. But moving on to the next team with a coaching change, and as we do this, I think the best way to kind of go through these divisions is just as we're doing coaching changes, we'll talk about this team. But Texas A&M had a really interesting hire this offseason. They paid Jimbo Fisher a shit ton of guaranteed money. They took him from Florida State.
All of it's guaranteed, I think.
Yeah, and they paid out the ass for really good assistant coaches. Defense coordinator Mike Elko from Notre Dame, who was at Wake Forest before that, did a really good job with Notre Dame last year. They have, let's see who else. Daryl Dickey from Memphis, who was the OC there. Memphis' offenses were always quite potent.
Yeah.
So,
but you mentioned Mike Elko?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
So, I mean, they paid for coaches. They're really going all out.
Not really a great defensive team last year, but we liked Elko, especially what he was able to do at Wake Forest, where there's not a lot of talent, and they always seemed that when he was there had pretty solid defenses. Then he was just at Notre Dame for 1 year, and we'll see if he can improve this A&M defense.
Well, and they have a lot of very highly talented. Yeah. I mean, this team has a lot of talent on it. When I was looking through their roster, they have a lot of very highly talented guys out of high school. It'll be interesting, though. A&M, when I was looking at their schedule, I don't know how this is only the 15th hardest schedule in the country. They play Clemson week 2, at Alabama week 4. Later in the year, they're at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, at Auburn. So, I mean...
There are a lot of hard schedules in this conference.
Yeah, this is it's incredible that this is only the 15th
It'll be interesting
schedule.
To see if that affects anything as far as... how many teams make the playoff at the end of the year?
Yeah, for sure.
Although Georgia, I don't think plays anyone tough out of conference, so that
Georgia's schedule's a little lighter once we get to them. I think
they don't have like a Notre Dame like they did last year.
Yeah, A&M. How do you think? What do you think would be reasonable for them? Like 8-4 this year, or do you think they exceed expectations? 9-10 wins. I mean, that's a hard schedule.
Yeah, probably something like 8-4.
If they got 8 wins, that I think. They did pretty well. Like they probably upset somebody on the road or beat Clemson somehow.
Also, Jimbo Fisher, I've never seen someone fail upward in such spectacular fashion like Jimbo Fisher did this past offseason.
Yeah.
Pretty abysmal season last year at Florida State. Things just fell apart. Top 5 team ends up 6-6 on the year, and they had so much talent that. Like when you see a team go downhill that hard,
he's usually coaching at like Houston, not Texas
A&M. Yeah. You're not making $75 million the next year at a new place.
Do you think A&M's an upgrade from Florida State for him? I know that
it's a weird move. It's a really weird move. Yeah,
it is.
Well, resources because no one right now is spending more money than A&M.
Yeah,
they just haven't been able to buy good enough players yet.
Yeah, I think the argument is like against him making this move is he's going to the SEC West. Now he still had to deal with Clemson, but that conference, I don't think usually is as strong as the SEC West, but I think Fisher just had to get out of there. He just realized the situation was kind of dire for him. I don't know if there was any more like off the field issues or anything, but I think the biggest factor was that he just simply got like $75 million guaranteed.
Yeah.
And that's kind of hard to turn down.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, he lost his team last year.
Yeah,
pretty much.
yeah. So, all right. So A&M, we think will be a solid team, but their schedule is just really brutal. I expect them to finish at the highest. I would say maybe third in the West, as low as 5 to 6. Maybe.
More like, yeah. There's a lot of spots they could finish in.
Yeah. Next team with a new head coach, also in the SEC West, we have Arkansas. And Arkansas is a pretty experienced team, I believe, again.
Another experienced
17
team.
returning starters. A team that definitely has some talent on it now. It's going to be a little bit different for them this year because they go from Brett Bielema, team which is a little bigger guy, stronger, like strong run game, strong defense, to Chad Morris, who was the offense coordinator at Clemson and was the head coach just recently at SMU. His teams are going to be more spread oriented. I think it's going to be more based on speed than power. So,
yeah, this is a big change.
I think there's going to be a little bit of a transition for them. Now, I still think this team could be pretty solid. Like they might surprise and finish maybe third or fourth. Maybe third might be a little high for them, but this team certainly is a team that I don't think is necessarily an easy out at any point for any of these teams in this conference.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm not expecting anything out of them really.
No, I mean, the last 3-9, 7-6, 8-5, 7-6, 4-8. I mean, this team, we're not expecting them to light it up or anything, but they do have a lot of returning talent that maybe Morris works some magic and they are pretty good. But
yeah, 9 starters back on O, 8 on D.
Yeah. So next team. Now this is I guess technically a new head coach.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that he was
interim coach last year.
Yeah, well, it says his second year, but
technically, yeah.
Yeah, I guess he did start the year because Freeze was gone.
That's true. Yeah, so I guess
it's his first year officially as the head coach.
Yeah, so Ole Miss, they're gonna suck. They have Matt Luke who took over for Hugh Freeze last year after all the bullshit that was going on there, but Ole Miss is going to have a very potent offense. Their defense is going to be very, very spotty. I think, though, they're going to struggle and likely finish last in this division. I don't really have much else to say about them.
Really good receivers. Everywhere else, they were kind of mediocre at best.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the new coaches in the East, and we'll kind of cover these teams, and then we'll cover the rest of the teams as we go along. But Florida, as we said, added Dan Mullen. He was offensive coordinator at Florida when Urban Meyer was there. They obviously won multiple championships. Mullen obviously was at Mississippi State for, I believe it was 8 years, and did very well there, considering that the conference they play in, and they weren't recruiting quite as well as some of the top teams in the SEC. But
always seem to exceed expectations.
Yeah, this is a really interesting team. They have 19 starters back now. I felt a lot stronger about them before yesterday. As of yesterday,
yeah, there's some news that it could change things. We don't know for sure what's coming out of that yet, but similar to last year, Florida had a lot of guys,
a lot of suspensions
before the season. They had a lot of injuries too, so they'll be getting guys back. They return 19 starters. I think they're top 5 in experience in the entire country this year. And I do like Dan Mullen. I've liked him for a while.
Their schedule is very reasonable too.
Yeah,
they don't really play anybody too tough out of conference.
Besides Florida State at the end of the year.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, they're in a rivalry game, so I expect them to usually play well in that game.
Yeah.
But they don't have Alabama this year. They don't draw Auburn as well, they don't have Alabama or Auburn, so they
catch LSU in what is probably a down year for LSU, or at least a big question mark.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
that's at home.
So I think the big thing with this, I don't know how you feel about this. I think with Florida, I think quarterback's going to be the big X factor for this team, as it is for a lot of teams. If Dan Mullen gets really good quarterback play, and this is assuming that they don't get like a ton of guys suspended or anything. So
Yeah.
we'll just say maybe like we're projecting this stuff to kind of blow over. Like maybe a couple guys miss the first game or two.
Yeah, we're assuming Florida's at full strength right now.
Yeah, if they get really good quarterback play though, this team can win the East in my opinion. I think they can beat Georgia and win this win the division, and then they're ultimately in a 1-game playoff with the West team for maybe a playoff spot. So
yeah, I agree. I think they can win the East. Because I think the way their schedule shakes out is that it's going to end up being that whoever wins the Florida-Georgia game goes to the SEC championship.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. So yeah, we'll get back more into.
And of course, that's a game that Florida, over the years has done really well in anyway.
Yes, and we'll get more into the divisional outlook as we go here. We'll just keep covering the new coaches, I guess.
Tennessee. Is there anyone else besides?
I think it's just Tennessee. I think we got all 6 of them. So Tennessee, we get to talk about Tennessee.
Yeah.
Tennessee actually did a good thing for once in their lives, in my opinion. They looked at one of their rivals, Alabama, and said, you know what? They have successful people there, so we're going to hire one of their guys. Like, imagine Ohio State hiring a Michigan man.
I'm surprised he wanted to go to this school.
I know. I think I don't know. They must have paid him a good amount. And it's funny to me that this team, for like the 3rd or 4th, 5th straight year, thought that they had a legitimate shot at somebody like John Gruden or like some other top, Division I college coach or whatever. So,
for the, 4th or whatever year in a row, people thought they were going to be good again.
Yeah.
Started the season ranked and ended up 4-8,
yeah,
which has been pretty typical of Tennessee for a while.
Well, it's kind of interesting. In their last, I think it's 40 games against ranked opponents, they're 6-34. In the last 10 years, just straight up, they are 62-63. So this team is a losing football program. And Jeremy Pruitt, we never even mentioned his name, was defensive coordinator at Alabama. He did a really good job there. Now, who knows? Like, we probably could be defensive coordinator at Alabama and probably have really good defenses. But, he might be good. You never know. And
this year, though.
Not this year. They're going to be pretty horrible. It's going to be a transitional year. They are at Georgia, at Auburn, at South Carolina. They're going to get killed by Bama. They play West Virginia week 1, which I project them to lose that game. So
they get Keller Chris transferring in from Stanford at quarterback.
Yeah, and he was bad.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
No, he was
really not.
He was bad. So I don't expect them to be very good. Now,
although I like the name Nigel Warrior.
Yeah, that is a very good name. It's the one positive that they do have going for them. Do we think
that's their strong safety?
Do we think Tennessee in the next 5 years wins the SEC East?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. No, yeah. The answer's no. Like, we didn't have to wait. No, they're not going to. They're never going to.
They haven't done shit for so long.
No, they're not good.
It's been like a decade.
Yeah,
they had like a couple good years, I guess.
Tennessee would have to really prove to me over like a 3-year period that they are back to being what they consider themselves as like a solid SEC program that could sometimes compete on the national front.
Like you said, they can't beat good teams.
Yeah,
period.
They just simply can't compete with the better teams in the SEC right now. And until they prove it, we're going to keep picking them near the bottom. So as far as the divisional outlook, I guess we can start talking about the teams that didn't have coaching changes. I mean, we'll start in the West with basically the king of college football right now, Alabama. Alabama is returning a decent amount of offense, including possibly an upgrade at quarterback with Tua. Oh, man. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name.
Tagovailoa.
We
just call him Tua, though.
Yeah, Tua looked possibly like an upgrade in the national title game over Jalen Hurts.
The thing about, it was a really amazing coaching decision. Saban's probably like the only guy who would do that. I remember thinking at halftime, like, Georgia just straight up had their offense stuffed. Like, they were too one-dimensional.
Yeah.
And when I saw him put out Tua for the second half, I was like, wow, he actually did it. And at the time, I was thinking that's a great move because Jalen Hurts can't do shit in this game, and they're going to lose if they leave him in there. It was obviously a brilliant move, and it worked out great for them.
Yeah, paid off. Alabama this year guys, we're not we're going to get into the champs in a little bit here, but this team's going to win this division.
Alabama's still good at football.
Their road games this year, this is the easiest schedule I've ever seen for Alabama with Nick Saban there. At Mississippi, at Arkansas, at Tennessee, at LSU, who's down this year. And now LSU is a rivalry game, but those are Alabama's in-conference road games. They don't draw Georgia. They get Auburn, Mississippi State at home.
And Louisville is like their big out-of-conference game this year. Usually they've got like a big marquee opponent in that first game in the neutral site. And this year it's Louisville a year after they are expecting to drop off quite a bit.
Yeah, I think once we get in the ACC pod, we can talk. I think Louisville will be all right, but that spread is at 25.
Yeah.
So Alabama's supposed to kill them. I have a really hard time seeing Alabama not go 12-0, to be totally honest. So
yeah, they've got a great shot at doing it this year. I mean, they lose a lot of guys, but they do every year. So that's not really a concern. They've just got they're just loaded. We don't know who some of these guys are yet, but I'm sure they're going to be really good. So it seems to happen.
I guarantee that half of these kids, or more than half on the starting 11 on defense, are going to be in the NFL. So I mean, they only have 3
and as usual, they've got an elite D line. So
yeah, they'll be fine. And this year, they might have one of their better offenses they've had in a while. Like it might balance itself out.
The one thing I will say is Tua still only played half of a game of college football. So I think we don't want to jump the gun
he
too
played
much.
A little bit before that. He had 11
In
touchdowns.
In
blowouts.
That many?
Yeah.
In blowouts, in garbage time.
Yeah.
So I want to see him. I want to see how he does as the full-time starter. We haven't seen that yet. So
and if he does for some reason suck, it's not like the backup hasn't played before. The
right,
backup's won a national title.
Yeah, they'll just put in Jalen Hurts, and we know that he can run through this schedule.
Yeah. So he's done it before. So yeah, Alabama's gonna be very good. A team that could potentially knock him off and maybe getting disrespected. The SEC defending West champs in Auburn Tigers. Auburn brings back Jarrett Stidham. He's possibly the best quarterback in this conference, so that's a very key position, obviously. Auburn's always quite strong on defense. Malzahn knows how to coach them up on offense. Now, the thing about Auburn is their schedule is a little bit rough this year. Part of the reason that, late in the year last year they were number one is they knocked off Georgia and Alabama both at home.
Yeah.
Flip the script. They got to go play those guys on the road this year. They are at Mississippi State. They get Washington in week 1 in a neutral game in Atlanta. So this team, I certainly think they're capable of winning the West again, but this schedule is really rough this year.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot of magic for them to win the West and set themselves up to even have a chance at the playoff if they did win the conference. Because I don't think they would get there with 2 losses with Bama being – Bama might lose a game like as an upset, but I see Auburn losing more than a game with this schedule. So
the thing about Auburn this year, obviously they beat Georgia the first time and then they beat Bama. This year they have both of those games on the road, so it's going to be a lot tougher to pull off.
Yeah.
They also opened the season with Washington. The good thing, I guess, that they have going for them is if they get some of those big wins again, they get that boost. Last year they were 1 win away from making the playoff as a 2-loss team just because of their big wins.
Yeah.
So they have opportunities there. Honestly think they're going to be a little worse than they were last year.
I do too.
One of the things I don't like about them going into this year is kind of depleted on the O-line, and they lose Kerryon Johnson, their leading rusher last year, which is a big part of their offense. So Jarrett Stidham is going to really have to carry the team even more this year.
Yeah, their defense is going to be...
I still think they're going to be one of the better defenses in the country.
Yeah, their defense will be one of the top in the country, but they're the thing I fear for them is it's the same reasons that Addison thinks they might be a little worse.
Think of some of the other D lines that this O line is going to be.
Yeah, they're really going to struggle with line play on offense. And I think Stidham's going to have a lot of pressure in his face. And that's the thing with the Gus Malzahn team. If they can't run the ball, then they're done. They will lose. So
I'm saying.
Could they pull off?
Their O line's a question mark.
Yeah.
They could be good, but they just lost a bunch of guys. So we'll just have to wait and see there.
Yeah, so I actually I actually think Auburn's going to finish third in this division. I actually have Mississippi State finishing second.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they play them on the road too.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I have them finishing third behind Mississippi State. So I think those two teams are capable of winning the West, but I think Alabama this year, like we said, easiest schedule I've seen for them in a long time in conference, and I think they're going to roll through it. We covered A&M. LSU.
Yeah, we haven't talked about LSU yet.
LSU is a team that,
and I think
for the last 15, 20 years, has been a lot of years a national title contender. And, it's interesting. I think that this team, I personally think that Coach O is a dead man walking.
Yeah.
I think that they feel that they went kind of almost like nostalgic with that hire. Like, do you remember when West Virginia won with that interim special teams coach, Bill Stewart, in the bowl game, and then they made him head coach? And it was like, he's from West Virginia. It was really nostalgic.
Yeah, you're right.
I think this team deserves an elite level head coach, and he is not that. He's good coordinator. He's a
good interim coach.
Yeah, great interim coach. His players play for him. They definitely love playing for him.
Yeah, he's always been a good recruiter too.
An excellent recruiter, but some guys just aren't meant to be head coaches, at least on this level. And this team is going to have a little bit of transition on offense this year. They are going to more spread. They're going to run a lot of 4 and 5 wide receiver sets, which our whole lives growing up, LSU was power run. Les Miles, Nick Saban, they ran the football. And not saying they're not going to run the football, but this year they bring in Ohio State transfer, Joey Burrow, who, for you LSU fans who don't know a lot about this kid, he can spin the ball. So you're getting a big upgrade at quarterback if he wins the job. Now, if he doesn't, then I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. But
I think he's expected to win the job. I haven't heard too much, but we're going to talk to one of our friends from New Orleans, and he might have some inside info there.
David from NOLA, he's been on the pod before, so yeah, he might have some info. But I don't think Burrow would have gone there without feeling like it was
like he had a good shot at winning the job.
Yeah. And I heard some coach speak where I think Coach O might have said something like, "Yeah, it's an open job or competition," but that's really to get the most out of Joey Burrow. So
yeah.
I think their offense, you might see some improvement, but this team, talk about tough schedules.
And there's just a lot of question marks on this roster.
I think. Yeah, there really is.
They always have a lot of talent. I just don't really. It's not proven.
Yeah, so this year
really proven talent.
They play Miami week 1, who's expected to be very good this year. They're at Auburn, at Florida. They draw Georgia out of the West, Alabama, the East. They draw Georgia out of the East. They draw Georgia and Florida, so right there's 2 games that they don't often get.
Yeah.
They also have Alabama, of course. And then at A&M to end the year is not – I mean, that's a game between 2 probably evenly matched teams. At A&M, I might give A&M a little bit of an edge. So LSU, this is a team that I know they have a lot of question marks, but they have so much talent on this team that let's say – Burrow lives up or exceeds expectations, this might be a team that surprises and gets like a 3rd place finisher in the West,
Yeah, because quarterback, has been a position this school over the last few years. They haven't got much out of that position. So
yeah.
And Burrow's still, he hasn't played very much in college, but Ohio State fans, we thought he legit could have been the starter at Ohio State this year, and he's definitely the kind of talent that should be starting at a big time school. So
yeah,
we'll see how he plays this year. He's got to get up to speed quickly because he's coming in in the summer.
Yeah, new system. It's late. Now I think the system. I'm not exactly sure what. When teams run 4 and 5 wide sets, they don't really differ from each other that much. There could be teams that attack the field more vertically. There could be teams that go more West Coast. Joey Burrow, though, in high school, and I'm just trying to give you, if anybody of the 9 people that watch this are Southeastern Conference fans or LSU fans and you don't know much about this guy, he threw the ball in high school a lot. Like, you think about Ohio, we have teams that run the ball a lot, but the whole nation, as far as high school football, is going more spread. There's more quarterbacks that are game ready as freshmen to play in college. This guy can throw the football.
Yeah.
This is the guy you've been looking for.
Record-setting passer.
Yeah, he was Mr. Ohio in football. So, I mean, this guy can play. But you do get him for 2 years, so that's a good thing because next year, hopefully, their schedule for their sake lightens up a little bit. But and they might have a new head coach. They might not.
Yeah.
Maybe they surprise. But I think this team this year,
wild card.
Their over-under's like 7.5, I think. I would not be shocked if they won like 9 or 10. But I honestly, I think they're right around 7 this year. Yeah. So down year for LSU. I think Coach O gets fired, and they bring in somebody legitimate to bring LSU back, because they're not a team that deserves to be picked 5th in the West. That's ridiculous. So
I don't think there's anything. Yeah, that's all the West teams.
Yeah, let's get into these. So obviously, no surprise, Georgia's the overwhelming favorite to win the SEC East, and with good reason. They bring back a lot on offense, and they do lose 2 NFL caliber running backs, but they bring back a very talented player in DeAndre Swift. They bring back Jake Fromm, who looked very composed for the most part as a true freshman. He looked very good for them. They always, even though they're like Alabama, even though they're losing a good amount of defense, they have an incredible amount of talent to replace them. So, and they
got Kirby Smart coaching them up.
Yeah, who's a very proven defensive coach. So, not only that, but this team, their schedule's a little lighter in my opinion as well. Now, week 2, I think is a pretty actually underrated game, and we'll get to a team that I think is very underrated this year, South Carolina. But they usually play Georgia pretty tough. Week 2, if Georgia gets by that game, then I expect them to roll into their October 27th game with Florida undefeated, and I think that game, as we said, likely would decide this division.
Yeah.
But they get Auburn at home this year. They don't draw Alabama like usual out of the West. So this team has a lighter schedule like Bama. A lot of people are projecting them to go 12-0, and a lot of people are projecting them to make the playoff, even with the understanding that maybe they don't win the SEC. How do you feel about Georgia?
Well, I mean, clear favorite out of the East. Jake Fromm last year as a true freshman. I actually thought he had a pretty good year.
Yeah.
Especially in the national championship game. I mean, he made some bad throws, but he was a freshman. For the most part, he looked pretty good, and I think he's got a lot of potential. So it'll be interesting to see how much he improves going into this year.
Yeah.
You mentioned the running backs. They lost, obviously, a ton of production at that spot, and that was huge for them last year. But I really like the talent that they've got waiting in the wings with DeAndre Swift, and he already proved it last year. He had a very good year. He averaged 7.5 yards a carry,
talented,
too.
Yeah. Elijah
Holyfield's there, too. So there's a lot of talent still in the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty solid everywhere on offense and defense. Like we said, they've got 5 returning starters, but there's so much talent, and we trust Kirby Smart at this point that they're going to be, one of the elite defenses of the country.
They're very good.
One thing I wonder if they could pull a Bama from last year. Like if they were to lose to Florida and that's their only loss, is there any way they can get in?
Bama had the Florida State win going for them. And,
yeah,
and
I know
the
schedule. The schedule's not as good.
It doesn't set up for them to I feel like they need to make the championship.
Yeah, and they don't have that Notre Dame kind of win either.
Yeah. Their out of conference schedules: Austin Peay,
Middle Tennessee, Massachusetts,
and UMass,
Georgia Tech.
And Georgia Tech's down this year, so I would think that that's not going to be likely this year. But if they go 12-0 and they lose to Alabama, no matter what Alabama's record is in the SEC championship game, they have a shot depending on how the other conferences.
They have a really good shot, I think.
Yeah. So we covered Florida. We think they have a legit shot. We'll get into our championship picks later here. South Carolina is a very interesting team to me. They bring back a good amount of experience, and there's definitely some talent on the roster. A guy that I made fun of a lot at Florida and Will Muschamp, he's done a good job. And maybe he just needed a fresh breath of air, a new environment.
Sometimes that first head coaching gig doesn't work out, and you just you got to get experience.
Yeah,
as a head coach.
But this team, like I said, they get Georgia week 2 at home. If they win that game, there's a good chance that they have a shot at this division. They are at Florida later in the year, but their road SEC games besides Florida are Ole Miss, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. They don't draw Alabama. They don't draw Auburn. So I really like the schedule. I like the confidence that this team gained from last year. I really think this team has a legit shot to surprise, shock everybody. I think this team can win this division. Now, whether I pick them or not, teaser, we'll get into that probably in the next 5 to 7 minutes. But what do you think? Do you think this team can win this division, or do you think they're maybe a year or two away? If Muschamp can even get them to that level.
Well, we talked up Florida a little bit, but I think this team also can give Georgia a run for their money, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Back when Spurrier was here, they used to give Georgia fits all the time. I think this is Will Muschamp's best team easily so far at South Carolina. Last year they lost Rico Dowdle and Deebo Samuel early in the year to their best offensive weapons. So they get those guys back. They bring a lot of guys back on offense. Jake Bentley, Will Muschamp's usually got a solid defense. So I agree with you that this team could definitely surprise people. And last year, even with those injuries, they had a really good season. At 9-4.
They did. Yeah, no, I
beat
like
Michigan at the bowl game.
Yeah, I like this team a lot. I think they have a shot. So we'll see what we pick when we get to the actual picks here. But
they were very scrappy.
They were.
Last year.
They were. That's a very Muschamp style team. I feel like. So to be honest, I don't really want to talk about Missouri.
They still seem to not fit into this conference.
Yeah,
right?
they crush teams they're supposed to crush, and then they lose to teams very, very badly that they're supposed to lose to.
Yeah.
So they have apparently an NFL first round possible pick in Drew Lock at quarterback. That could be their saving grace, where maybe they pull off some upsets if he's special. But there's not much else I want to say about this team because I don't think they have a shot to win the division. So I think they're very middle of the road. Maybe they make a bowl game. Maybe they give a couple of these teams some fits. But, I mean, they're at South Carolina. They're at Alabama. They're at Florida. They're going to lose all those games more than likely. So
yeah, they do bring a lot back on offense. It was pretty explosive. They still play like a Big 12 team, though. They
don't control the line.
Yeah, they're not tough. They can't beat good teams.
Yeah. I think until they prove that they can beat some. Yeah,
I'm just not going to have any faith in them to do anything until they can be competitive in some of those bigger games. Let alone win them.
Right. I don't have anything to say about Kentucky.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I don't have anything to say about Kentucky.
Yeah.
Tennessee, we love making fun of Tennessee. We covered them. Vandy, they're usually, last year they weren't. They screwed me in a couple bets. Vandy unders are usually very good. Vandy away dog is usually a good bet. Derek Mason's good defensive coach. I think that they'll be possibly a little improved from last year, but they're still going to finish, I believe. I actually think I have them 6th in the East. I have Tennessee in the basement. So I think Vandy beats Tennessee again at home. And so, if we want to get David from New Orleans on, and then we can start getting into what he thinks and then our picks. And then a little bonus for you guys at the end of this, we're going to maybe discuss recent ESPN article where they listed the last 20 national champions and ranked them. We have some thoughts on that as OSU fans.
Yo.
Hey, Tolman. How's it going? Hey, we're good. Do you think that's going to work?
Turn up higher.
That's all the way.
You there, Tolman?
Yeah.
Okay, we can hear you good.
All right, so for you S&Sers, we, on the House Beer Hotline, have David from New Orleans, who was on, I believe, how many pods did you do last year, man? Like 1 or 2 of them?
You were on live one of them and probably called in for another, right?
Yeah, I did I think I did like one of the end of the year ones with y'all, like after the.
Oh yeah.
Announced or something.
Yeah, and I think he did. I think you did like a conference preview possibly in the beginning of the year. I think he did like Big Ten Notre Dame because we lumped Notre Dame. Actually, I remember this because it sounded like we were kind of hyping up Notre Dame, and Steele looked like he had that that look in his eye. Like, and Steele's not here with us today. He's still alive. It sounded like I said he died, but Steele's on vacation, so that's why he's not here in person. Corey from Denver might.
I saw his Instagram pics.
Okay, yeah. So Steele's alive, but last year Steele had this look in his eye, like maybe we all were real high at Notre Dame, and then I remember David from New Orleans was just like, "No, they're not going to make the playoff. They're overrated. They're the most overrated program." Like, it was.
They said they were like irrelevant. Actually.
Yeah, that's what it was. He said they're irrelevant. Yeah.
Are you in New Orleans right now?
Yeah.
All right. Do you
yeah.
have any inside info on the LSU quarterback situation? Because we were talking about that earlier.
Well, I've heard that, as Coach O would like to say, Ja Burra.
Yeah.
the Burra fella.
Yeah.
He's not a lock to start, so I think it's between him and Miles Brennan.
Wow.
Yeah.
But then there's like another, and then there's a couple of they say that it's down to four. There's four guys in the mix.
Yeah. There's a lot of guys. I remember there were a bunch of guys, and then Joe Burrow jumped into that mix too.
Well,
And they have a bunch of different like kind of quarterbacks. I think like one of them's a runner. I think, and then.
Yeah. So I get asked like, what do you think of Joe Burrow? Like by LSU fans down here, like, what do you think of Joe Burrow? Like, are we gonna like Joe Burrow? And like, I guess I keep coming back to, I keep saying this. He's kind of like Matt Flynn.
Okay.
Like in terms of like talent and just overall quarterbacking. And then I say that, and then they get really excited because Matt Flynn won a national championship.
yeah. You're saying Matt Flynn not to say he's like a lead or anything, and that gets him excited.
But then I'm like, yeah, but Matt Flynn had like Dwayne Bowe, Trendon Holiday, like.
Yeah, he had a lot of talent.
Multiple NFL skill guys.
That's when LSU was putting out like multiple first-round receivers every year.
Right, and they don't have that this year. I mean, they just lost Geis and DJ Chark, who's their leading receiver. So, I mean, honestly, there's what 30-ish days until college football, and you'd think there'd be a lot of buzz about LSU football here, but not really. Everyone's talking about the Saints.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, me and Nick were saying this is a team with a lot of question marks, and it's,
I think we have them generally projected around like 7 or 8 wins maximum. What do you think?
I actually had 7-8. So
okay,
yeah.
I think that's spot on.
Okay.
What happens to Coach O if they win 7?
But I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said, what happens to Coach O if they win 7 games? Is that good enough?
I don't think so, but I don't think Coach O is just. Coach O is a recruiter and a great defensive line coach.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we said earlier on the pod. We said some guys just aren't cut to be head coaches, but he's an excellent position coach, like assistant coach, and a great recruiter. Do you have any idea about, just kind of looking ahead, do fans have like a guy that they're targeting possibly as like the next coach, or is that looking like too far ahead maybe?
For the longest time, like it was Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah.
Just because of his previous time here at LSU.
Right.
And then briefly it was Tom Herman.
That's right.
But then they decided to go, then they went Coach O. So, not really right now.
Okay.
So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I haven't thought about it.
I have no idea. I guess because we don't. The question might be kind of shitty because we don't really know who will be available. I just didn't know if
They should get Bo Pelini.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was a guy that like maybe had LSU ties that was an assistant somewhere or like as a head coach at a smaller school. I just didn't know if there were fans, the diehards there that had a guy in mind. But I like you said, I do remember like offshore sites had Tom Herman as the odds-on favorite, and then out of nowhere he Texas came in and swooped him up. So, we'll see. I think if Coach O gets 8 or 9 wins, there's a good shot they give him another year. But if he has 7 or less, I think they're going to decide that they deserve an elite coach and they're going to let him go. That's just my opinion. But
I mean, if you're talking about a younger coach, I mean, it's the younger coach is there as the defensive coordinator, Dave Aranya. So I mean, that's
yeah.
I'd say
that's a possibility.
That's a possibility, but it's an interesting thing if you're gonna fire Coach O because of the state's like financial issues, you know.
Yeah.
So and it's a state funded school. You're already paying Les Miles for eternity.
Yeah.
Have to do that again. So it might not be as cut and dry as wins and losses.
Okay.
Les Miles needs to tweet more.
That's a good point. Yeah, I forgot about how that state's struggling, and that is a state funded school. So that's a really good point. So we were, just as we got you on, we are in the part of the segment now where we are going to pick our SEC West and East champion, and then who wins the championship game. And then, if you remember from last year, dude, we do we list how many teams in this conference we think actually could make the playoff if they win the SEC title game. And then we like to differentiate between teams that have playoff potential, but then with teams that have national title potential. Like, like if we use the Big Ten as an example, I mean, just in my opinion, I think Wisconsin is potentially a playoff team, but I don't think they're a national title team. Whereas I think like Ohio State is a potentially national champion. So if we'll start with you, dude, if you want to give your West champion, maybe give like your contenders there, and then you can just go right after that with your East champion who wins the conference, and then what teams you think have a legit shot to make the playoff, and who do you actually have in the playoff if you do have an SEC team in the playoff?
All right, so West champion Alabama, East champion Georgia. So Alabama versus Georgia in the title game. I'm guessing that's probably not going to differentiate much from you guys. So I'm going to let you guys explain your reasoning on that, because I got a couple of things to talk about in terms of like contenders and sleepers and
sure.
The more interesting thing in this conference are who do you think could break through out besides those two? Because we obviously all have the same top two teams.
Right. So first, who could break through and win a division? I think definitely Auburn because of quarterback play. But I think in the East, maybe Florida because of coaching. But I think they're probably a year away with Mullen. You know, he's got to get some of his guys. He's got to take a year to implement a system. But I think if you talk about the teams that made some splashy hires in the offseason, I think Florida's got the shortest timeline to getting back to being good and contending for a playoff and contending for a title. I think they'll be the fastest. I think that I don't see that as much with Tennessee, maybe Texas A&M.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I agree. Florida, you're right. I think they could be back pretty quick. You know, next year we'll be back to kind of thinking about Florida as, the Florida that.
The team that won a lot of SEC titles.
Yeah. Not necessarily Florida under Urban, but back to competing at least,
Right. Addison, if you, I guess before we get into ours, I'll give
a couple sleepers that could finish like maybe second or third
in
their
go ahead.
respective divisions. Mississippi State in the West and Mizzou in the East. And that's just because of good They probably have two of the better quarterbacks in the SEC.
Okay.
So that could win them some games. Although I think their crossover games are tough. I think State's got Georgia perhaps, and Mizzou's got Alabama. So, but.
Okay. Yeah. No, those are definitely reasonable. I think Missouri. That surprised me a little bit, but I mean it makes sense with. I was saying before you came on, they could give some teams some fits just purely because of gifted quarterback play. So I think that's reasonable. I guess, Addison, before I go to you, I'll give some other picks from some notable pod affiliates. Brian J. from Columbus has Alabama out of the West versus Georgia in the East. He has Alabama as your SEC champion, and they are a playoff team for him. He only has one playoff team from the SEC, so no Georgia. And he says there are no sleepers and no other contenders. He's very high on those two teams this year. The roommate has Alabama, a.k.a. trash, as she likes to call them, from the West. And then she has Georgia from the East. She has Alabama winning the conference and making the playoff with no other contenders. So far, very chalky and boring. A new pod affiliate, potentially, who might come on for the Big Ten podcast in a couple weeks, Scott from Toledo, has Alabama from the West, Georgia from the East, Alabama winning.
Sorry, it's just funny to hear Scott from Toledo.
Yeah. So they all have the same though. They all have Alabama. Yeah, they all have Alabama over Georgia with no real.
Yeah, we all have the same picks, right?
I don't know yet. What's your picks? Go for it.
I mean, I have Alabama over Georgia.
Okay.
I think they both make the playoff.
Okay, so to keep this a little bit entertaining, do you think does Auburn have a chance to make the playoff if they won the West and then won the championship? Yeah,
I think if Auburn wins the SEC, then there's a really good chance that they're in the playoff.
Okay, and then what about?
And they could definitely win the playoff.
Okay, and then what about Florida or Mississippi State, like teams that are kind of right there on the border?
I don't want to call those teams, playoff teams. Okay. Although I think Florida can get there because Tolman, me and Nick mentioned that we think the Florida-Georgia winner goes to the SEC championship.
I don't know. Florida's quarterback situation is messy.
It's spotty.
Yeah. But the reason we said that was because of schedule, really, because Florida's schedule, is kind of favorable.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Fine,
all right.
I'll buy that.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up. I do have Alabama playing Georgia, and I have Alabama winning the SEC championship. And I mean, I wasn't trying to get too much into our playoff picks, but I have Alabama in the playoff. I'm not going to say if I have Georgia or not. I'm going to save my playoff picks for when we actually get to that pod. But teams as far as teams, I guess, that I think could make the playoff, I think Auburn could. If Mississippi State won the West and won the SEC, I think they could make the playoff. I think if Florida or South Carolina shocked in the East and they upset Alabama, I think they could make the playoff. Now, as far as national title contenders, I think it's three teams. I think Alabama, Georgia, and Auburn are the only three teams that I think I give a legit shot to win a national title this year. So, this is a lot different from when we did the Pac-12 and the Big 12 pod. In the Pac-12 and Big 12, we had pretty much only consensus one team that we all thought was maybe, well, not really, because Corey from Denver thought maybe Oklahoma was not a national title contender this year, possibly, but three of us did.
Yeah.
In the Pac-12, I think, did you say you thought Washington was maybe a national, or maybe Corey did, but
I thought Washington and USC, because I had USC winning the conference.
Yeah. But I guess we had them as playoff contenders, but we didn't.
Yeah.
We weren't real unanimous on national title. But it's a lot different with the SEC, where we now have, I think, consensus three teams that we think could win a national title. Steele, I don't think we're gonna get, I believe, Corey on from the pod. You want to try him real quick, maybe, or see if?
Well,
does anybody have Georgia winning the SEC?
No one picked Georgia.
I don't believe so. I can give Steele's real quick. He has Bama over Georgia. He says Florida will be improved. He said Georgia could win the national title, but he does not believe Georgia makes the playoff this year. So we don't have two SEC teams from him. I can find out real quick. Why don't we get into the ESPN article real quick?
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and I'll see if Corey can get on.
My phone's right there.
I know. So I said I'm going to try to get Corey on my phone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how are we going to look up the article?
I'm going to look it up as soon as I see if I can get him on.
All right. Yeah, Tolman. So we were going to talk about this ESPN article that ranked all of the playoff teams or no, ranked all of the national champions
Like
from
the past 20 years.
Yeah, past 20. Actually, I think it was 21.
Okay, yeah.
I think it was 21.
Yeah. They had.
It was since the BCS, right?
Yeah. It was since
BCS era.
It was since
So
1998 when
Tennessee won.
Tennessee.
Yeah.
T. Martin.
Who would you rank as the best team in that period of time, though?
And they had to win a national championship.
Yeah, national champs.
Okay, so.
Do you want me to give you ESPN's top?
Yeah, no. I think I can't. 2001 Miami.
Yeah.
That's who a lot of us think, except they had a very.
Miami, or like USC.
04 USC.
Sophomore year. Those would be my two.
Yeah, I agree with those. The first two I think of are 01 Miami, 04 USC. They actually went with Texas at number 1.
Vince Young, Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just not a team. That's just a individual performance.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's just like one guy. But and also, if you're really going to rank the teams against each other, Mac Brown is going to rank pretty far down in terms of coaches too. So that's another reason I don't really like that team as being the number 1 team.
But also to go against what we said about Miami, I believe that even though it was Butch Davis's players, I believe that Coker.
That was Coker, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Although in terms of NFL talent, I mean.
Oh yeah.
Pretty ridiculous.
They had another controversial ranking. Dude was they had the 02 OSU team as the last ranked team, and I get that they played really ugly football a lot of that year, like the Purdue game, the Illinois game, I believe. There was definitely
there was a lot
of close calls, but that team was the first team ever to go 14-0. They beat 5
Miami.
or 6 ranked teams, which that year the Big Ten, according to a lot of media outlets, was ranked as the best conference. So it's not like they had an easy schedule. And then they beat 34 wins in a row dynasty Miami as a 14-point underdog.
And not only that, but we set the record for number of players drafted 2 years after that.
Yeah, so that was kind of controversial. Another one that I found, this could be a little bias in me, but they had the 14 Ohio State team ranked 14th, and I really thought that team at the end of the year was really something to watch.
And another thing, if you're talking just purely NFL talent too, is that team had one of the best. Well, it wasn't the year after; it was 2 years later, just like the 02 team. But that draft when all those guys left was one of the, best drafts of like that any college ever had.
I've got the rankings here. So they've got 05 Texas number 1, 2008 Florida Gators with Urban Meyer, where the year where they lost to Ole Miss and Tebow gave the promise speech or whatever.
Yeah, see, that's another one that's surprising to me. They didn't even have Miami second.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, we've agreed on this. I think 01 Miami is definitely the best team. I think the 08 Gators deserve to be up there top 3, but I think 04 USC was a better team. I think they're right up there with Miami. I also thought I really did like the 2011 Alabama team. The second best team in the country was apparently LSU, and Alabama beat them 21-0 in the championship. Nobody could score on Alabama that year. So I think that was Saban's best Alabama team. But, there's some other ones that, there's some really great teams in there. What's funny is when I look back on this too, like 2000 Oklahoma, I was like, I don't think they were that good. But when I looked at their team, they had a couple huge wins against some really good teams. They just were so, I think they were a little more conservative on offense before Bob Stoops decided to open up the offense with that team. But their defense was so good. And
that's funny. They were actually really good on defense. And then they kind of became the inverse of that over the years.
They became what the Big 12 became, essentially. But then, another one, which I always make fun of them, but the 98 Vols, Tennessee, they beat, I think 5 ranked teams on the road that year.
Yeah, they did beat a lot of good teams. I don't care.
But yeah,
I don't think that they were.
Well, I still think 02 Ohio State is better than 06 Florida. 2007 LSU should be the worst team.
Yeah. We think LSU 2 losses should have been the worst team on the list.
I think we thought that any champion in 2007 should have just been the worst team because everybody had at least 2 losses. Like OSU with 2 losses played Alabama with 2 losses. Is that not correct? Weren't we 10-2 going into that game, or were we 11-1 and then we lost the game? So they had 2 losses in the game, and we didn't have 2 losses.
They had 2 losses. We had 1.
Yeah, but even if we won that game,
we ended up lost to Illinois and Juice Williams.
Yeah. That I was at that game. That was a disaster. I think we all were at that game.
As was I.
Yeah, we all were at that game and wanted to kill ourselves. But yeah, it's an interesting article. I don't like their reasoning. Like Tolman, they said exactly what you said, but they spinned it into a positive. They said we pretty much picked Texas because he's the best player of the last 20 years, and it's like.
That's only one guy.
Okay, that's fine, but put him up against a defense like 11 Alabama or 2001 Miami or 2008 Florida. Texas should have lost to Ohio State that year.
Yeah.
Ohio State outplayed them that game. They just had, I think, a coaching flaw with rotating the quarterbacks essentially. And give Texas credit. They grinded out that win. They deserved it at the end or whatever. But I honestly thought, even though they won the game, and you play it on the field, so I'm not trying to take anything away from Texas. I think they're definitely a top 10 champion. But I really thought that the USC team that they beat was better than them. I just think Texas caught them on the wrong night.
And the USC team from the year before was even better.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to get Corey on the pod. He hasn't responded, but knowing Corey, I don't want to speculate too much, but I would assume he has Alabama beating Georgia in the championship game. The only thing I'm not quite sure of is if he has multiple teams in the playoff or not, but we can save that for when we actually do the playoff prediction pod and kind of wrap up these preseason conference previews. But we're at about an hour now, so I think usually we don't try to go too far over that. But is there anything you two want to add to wrap up the SEC preview, or I don't know, any closing thoughts?
Tolman, I want to hear your thoughts. How many teams do you think the SEC is going to get 2 teams in or not this year?
No.
Do you think?
All right. I think they will.
I don't think they do.
So you have Alabama and Georgia making the playoff?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. I don't think they do this year because I actually think Georgia is going to lose to either South Carolina or Florida. And at LSU, I know LSU's down. But Tolman, down there with those fans as well as anybody, that is a tough place to play no matter what. And they have the talent to possibly pull off that upset. So I think out of those 3 games, and they still have Auburn, which is at home, those 4 games, I think Georgia's going to lose a game. And then I have them losing to Bama, so I have a 2-loss SEC runner-up. I don't think that team gets in my opinion.
No.
Now, what I will say this year to wrap up this pod, and it's a good segue for when we get into these last 2 conferences, is that I think the SEC and the Big Ten this year actually both have a legit shot to get 2 teams in. I just think it's mainly because the Pac-12 and the Big 12 are a little down. If the Pac-12 and the Big 12 had maybe like 2 heavyweights at the top that I felt like were pretty legit on the national front, then I think we would be talking more about like 1 team from 4 conferences. But this year, I think there's a legit shot for the SEC and the Big Ten to one of them to get maybe 2 teams in. I'm not going to say who I'm going to pick, but we'll get into that in those other pods. So, Tolman, any closing thoughts?
Greg Oden's on ESPN right now.
Yeah, we're going to watch that game once we sign off here. Tolman, did you hear about the drama with the team? How Sully is not playing because he's getting married tomorrow, and BJ Mullins isn't playing because they have a dispute about how much he gets paid if they win the whole thing.
I don't think the drama with Sully is anything because let the guy's got to get married. Congratulations, Sully.
Yeah.
But are you surprised that BJ Mullins?
No, I just think it's hilarious.
That's Stocky. That's him, right? That's him, right? I mean,
yeah. He needs a better agent, apparently.
We also thought it was funny that Dokic's kid, what's his first name?
Andrew
Dokic petitioned to be on this team, and Scooney Penn told him no.
Said no, yeah.
You know what's fun? You can go onto the TBT website and you can look at the profiles of the teams and you can see how much each player is going to make for if they win.
I did that today. I saw that they had a salary listed.
Yeah, and it's just funny the other things they list on there, like super fan and GM and coach and stuff like that. Scooney Penn.
Yeah.
Apparently the GM and Evan Turner is the head coach of this team. So it's I love it. You can do it. It's a totally the tournament's so much freedom. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a cool league, and it's something to kind of get us through this lull post World Cup and no Game of Thrones. There's not a whole lot going on right now besides
just us doing podcasts.
Yeah, and NFL training camp, which seems to last for 2 months. So, Tolman, what about real quick before we wrap this up? I know that you guys, I know that your Saints are obviously projected to be possibly a Super Bowl contender, but what about your Browns, man? It looks like they might sign Des Bryant now.
I mean, the Browns are interesting. They have a lot of good skill players. They're on Hard Knocks. You're going to get to see the dysfunction up front. So
best team that could be on Hard Knocks, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're relevant. I mean, you got Tyrod and Baker in a RV clubhouse.
Yeah.
I kind of picture a Step Brothers situation, just them doing a bunch of activities. And if that's the case, then I'm all for it.
Yeah. Cool.
Baker's apparently getting fat.
Okay.
Yeah. Tolman's more.
Was anybody expecting Cleveland to be a good situation for him?
No.
It's not a good situation for anyone.
No.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks to David from New Orleans for coming on, and maybe we get him on for ACC or Big Ten preview. But I think that's going to do it for the SEC or the SNS College Football Podcast, the SEC preview. Clearly, we tried to make it a little less boring than what it is, but we pretty much feel that Alabama's going to play Georgia. And,
so much chalk.
Alabama's going to wipe the floor with this conference and be in the playoff and ready for another national title. Hopefully not, but we will see. So next week, I believe we're gonna settle on the ACC Notre Dame preview no matter what.
Yeah.
And then the week following that, we'll end with the last Power 5 conference with the Big Ten. And those two conferences, I think we're going to have some more playoff teams coming out of them. So it should be exciting stuff. So till next time.
Bye.